Hey, so welcome back to Conversations with Carrie, where I get to talk to amazing, incredible people who are making a huge impact in the lives of others, in the world, in their industry, um, about other things besides what they do for a living. And I'm finding this series so fun, so soul filling, so refreshing, and getting some really cool feedback from those of you who watch regularly. So today I'm talking to my friend Jean Berry, who is amazing at what she does, like brilliant and really a leader and an innovator, I feel like, in the industry that she's in. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about all of the things that make you tick, Jean. So one of the things I really like about doing this is recognizing that how we do anything is how we do everything. And that's why I like having these conversations, right? So people can get to see how you do everything instead of people just sort of, I don't want to say droning on, but giving the same talk that they give regularly. So hi, Jean, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm kind of excited and nervous to talk about other things.
I know, I kind of like that too. Like it's fun for me to get people to like be themselves in an interview format, which sounds so silly, right? Like, of course we're going to be ourselves. And yet so many of us who are sort of conditioned in the industry that we're in, right, are conditioned to like have your topics and talk about those and take any question and bring it back to the topic. And this is not that.
Yay.
So thank you for joining me from someplace in your house that's not your office. I feel like that just sort of sets a whole different tone. So tell me where you are in your home.
So I'm actually in the living room, and I have live plants and paintings, and and comfy cushions, and and a big fireplace here to my other side. So it's a
Which
lovely
is
place.
which is totally different than meeting in your office. And I know I've asked you about it before, but not in an interview. One of the many things that you do or have done in your life is art. And I happen to know that that painting behind you was, Jean is an incredible artist. This isn't like her main biz, at least not how I know her. But I do know you get paid to paint, right? Like people commission paintings. And tell me about the one behind you.
So, it's interesting because this particular painting, let's see if I can move it up a little bit. It's big. It's a
Yeah.
big painting. And, what's interesting about it is that it's different than everything else that I paint.
Yeah.
It's one of those funny things that every so often something shows up, and being an intuitive painter, I just paint what shows up. And it's always a surprise for me, like a gift from the universe, like, woohoo, here's something new. And to see how that rolls out and shows up. And this one, I don't even remember what I called it. It was has some deep meaning behind it. There's actually a bunch of people actually inside of this painting that you can't see. Although you pointed one out that I hadn't seen before. From this angle, you could see a different one. But yeah, there's different brush strokes that when the light hits it differently, it actually shows different things. So yeah, really, I love experimenting. I love seeing what'll show up and trying something new. And even as an artist, though, it's easy to go back on the thing Like, I know how to do this kind of painting, and so you do it over and over and over again. And as long as it's bringing joy, that's a good place. But sometimes it's about living on that artist's edge, like being on the edge of saying, what's going to happen next? I don't know.
I love that. I love what you said about the artist's edge because since I've known you, which I think it's been like 4 years now that I have known you, and the way Jean and I met is that we were in a similar group. I think we were doing like one of those like speed, it wasn't speed dating, it was like speed networking. And we were in the same group and she handed me her card and I instantly fell in love with her branding and how she showed up. I was like mesmerized by this woman because even in this group that we were in, you were like this anomaly in the way that you showed up, in like the way your branding was, right? It immediately spoke to me. Even what you said you were about, which I think it's safe to say, because you've niched down further. But at the time, I think you said, well, I help people create miracles. And I was like, oh my God, that's so refreshing. Right? But I want to talk to you about living on the artist's edge, because since I have known you, I have watched you live on the edge in such a fun and playful and inspiring way. So I know when I asked you what you wanted to talk about today, you were saying you had this trip to France, but I actually want to start a little before that, because since I've known you, you've moved from Minneapolis to Austin. And I feel like that was part of living on the artist's edge. So can you tell me about that?
Well, that's interesting, because choosing where you're going to live on the planet is an interesting choice. Now, sometimes you land there because that's where you're living or went to school or, grew up or whatever. And yet I've always thought it was really interesting to choose. And we actually moved to Minneapolis to raise a family. Like, it seemed like a great place to raise a family.
So where were you before Minneapolis?
Actually, I met my husband in San Diego. We had been living there for 6 years. And we moved to Kansas City, to Philadelphia, to Omaha. And when we were in Omaha, and I was pregnant with our second child, I said, I don't want to raise kids here. It's a lovely town. Like, I really do love Omaha. In fact, my son's living there now, which is funny. It's a weird circle. You know how those things roll back around again. He was born there, and then here he is.
That's crazy.
But we said, well, where do we want to live? And we chose Minneapolis, for some of the basic things that parents choose it for. There's, schools and, family values, whatever that means. But then in a town that also supported arts and creativity and that kind of thing, that had a space that was a place where you could be you.
Okay, I did not even know that about Minneapolis. I have my own biases. I know I've heard of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I like, this is just what I've seen about it on TV. I like that it is like big city and small town at the same time. I didn't know that it was super supportive of the arts, but I'm wondering, it's effing freezing. Were you down for that?
Well, see, that is kind of the deal. It's true. And, I think when your kids are little, you don't notice because you're running, you're running all the time. You just don't notice how damn cold it is. And at some point we're like, okay, we've done our thing, right? And we've shoveled enough snow, and we started to explore, well, where are we going to live? Where would be a great place to go? And of course, all those same things were important, arts. And, my husband referees soccer. He wanted a soccer place. And as we were in the middle of that conversation, my husband's business moved their headquarters to Austin.
I didn't even know that. I just thought you guys picked it.
No, so it became this really magical gift from the universe where we were moved to Austin.
Of course you were. I totally didn't know that. I thought it was your kids had grown. You were I thought it was your sort of next phase of our life decision, which I recognized that it was, but I didn't know that the universe even made it easier for you.
Oh, yes. Yes, it was very simple. And then, we discovered, although it's warm in the summer, you can't shovel heat. And so that is okay with us.
Oh, that's funny.
So we've been Austin's been a really great entrepreneurial, artsy, music-y town. It's a fun place to live. And it's hip enough that our kids will come visit. So that's cool.
I love that you say it's hip enough that our kids will come visit. Okay, so since you've, I have all these things on my list. So let's talk about, I've talked about living on the artist's edge. So that's really cool, that the artist's edge. Maybe let me ask back up and say, what does that mean for you, living on the artist's edge?
Well, I first heard that term from Yo-Yo Ma. who said, it was a quote, something along the lines, I don't know the exact words, but something like, it is the artist's job to go to the edge and then come back and report.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. And so that, see, it still gives me goosebumps, because it's that whole idea of not just going there in an artist fog, like I'm going to go do this thing, and because that's serving me, but it's to report back too. It's about coming back to community, society, to all those things, and making sure that people see the world the way we see it.
Okay, I know you just said something important and it like went right over me. So can you say that again?
So the way an artist sees, I believe that artists are put on the earth to shake things up, to make sure that people are being self-aware and seeing themselves in not just the same old rote way, kind of like we were saying, you live in the place because you grew up there. Instead of saying, I'm going to see this the same way, what if you chose? And so as an artist, I feel like that's the job of artists, even musicians or whatever else, to take you to a new place so that you can choose.
Okay, I just have to say, remember we started with how you do anything is how you do everything. What you just said now makes so much sense. Like the way that you work with people in your business, I never put it together. I just thought you were a genius. I didn't recognize, oh, it's because she lives on the artist's edge. It's because she sees things that way. You said shake things up and cause you to see things differently, and without giving away exactly what you do. Oh yeah, it makes total sense. Working with you is like coming from a completely different, like it gets the result I'm looking for in a way that as we're going through the process, I'm like, what is she even doing here? And then boom, there it is. Oh, that was such a good, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. And that's why in our, I'm just like right now dwelling in you and freaking loving it, because I've known you for so long and I've never appreciated that. Like like Jean's my fun, quirky friend who like, I've never, I'm just loving experiencing you this way, like as an artist, as someone who lives on the artist's edge. Now, I've experienced you as someone who lets the universe guide and lives in joy and lets her higher self run her business and celebrates everything. Like I've seen all of that, but what you just said makes me like, I just savor you. So let's talk about your trip to France, because so what I wanted to say is, I guess, like, this is why business coaches say, or anybody will say, if you're frustrated, right? For me, I'll go on a run or go take a nap, or, that's why people in business are being pushed more towards creativity, and everybody's going to painting classes now, right? Is to have access to the answers that our like thought process is blocking. And I know that you took a trip to France and it was game changing and life changing. And I remember that a big reason for that trip was because we've always wanted to, because we think it's going to be amazing. And you really did set some good intentions about also knowing this is part of my creative process, right? This is part of getting access. So tell me all about it.
Well, it is so interesting, because I did say, before we go, my intention is to let the universe show off, right? And in a really cool, tangible way. And I didn't know how that would roll out. And yet it was incredibly magical. We started out in Nice, and we went to a museum that I had never even heard of, but it was Marc Chagall, who does all this very expressionistic painting. And this particular museum is really large-scale paintings, all with a religious base. Now, if you've done any studying of art in, that kind of thing, it's all about religion, right? And they're usually these very dour, serious kind of paintings that are illustrating some very specific passage from something. And these Chagall paintings were just bursts of color that if you looked at them, you'd see then, okay, all these little things that you're like, okay, well, and they'd say what this painting was about, what story it was about. And you're like, okay, well, I kind of get that. I get the feeling. And it's about standing in the feeling of that and not necessarily saying this is an actual realistic depiction of what went down in this particular story. And they're so huge. Each one is like 10 feet, 12 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
And so they had to make a museum for it. Where else would these paintings go?
Right.
And it was just such a cool experience to be in the space of a master painter conveying feeling and emotion through their paintings, which was just so magical. And, from there we went through the rest of France. We ended up in Paris, of course. And each step along the way we were stopping and in art meccas. And these are places where masters have made really significant impacts on the world because of going to that artist edge and then coming back and illustrating what that is. We went to see where Van Gogh painted. We went to, we saw those spaces. And then in Paris, which is Picasso's town, there's just, Paris is about Picasso. It just is. And all the different little spaces dedicated to him, and of course Picasso's museum itself, which is life-changing. And I'm not a museum-y kind of person. I don't like classic museums. I don't like that kind of thing. And yet these so moved me, this whole idea of what it is that we're about and how it can make a lasting impact on the world. They were doing a huge display on Guernica. And if, for our viewers who are not like artists, like we know what that is.
Well, I was just about to say,
like, oh, I don't know.
I don't really know who Guernica is or what Guernica is.
Yeah. So Guernica is a huge, huge painting. It is actually in Spain, but they were doing a show about it in Paris because Guernica was a small town in Spain where one of the first experiments of the Second World War was done there, and they basically demolished the population of the small town in Spain called Guernica.
Okay.
And the outpour of upset just wasn't there. Yet the arts community came forward and said, this is atrocious. And of course, Picasso was from Spain, and he did this huge scale painting, which has had huge implications across the art world since it was made, and called it Guernica. And it got, and he said it would never in his life go back to Spain. Well, it did end up back in Spain after Franco was ousted, finally, after, many, many, many years. But it's interesting, as an artist who never was in politics, like most artists stay out of that realm. And yet the impact that can be made through a single statement like that evokes the kind of emotion that shows up through a painting. And so it's that same thing of the Chagall paintings of you could feel the emotion in those, and then standing in front of this big painting about an atrocity. And then the different paintings that it spawns. So the whole show was about showing everything that led up to that large scale painting that he did, and then everything after, because his life is so documented. You get to see everything, the little drawings, everything else. But then they had a whole room of artworks that had been inspired by that painting. Oh. And which is just another level of it, saying, taking it to the next level. How do you impact not just the people you impact, but the people who they impact?
So it was art by other artists.
Yes.
So ripple effect. One painting, one human being's emotion expressed, and the ripple effect of that.
Exactly. And so, just really this whole kind of art mecca experience was just really so magical. And of course, we did lots of other cool things in France and had all kinds of very fabulous things. We were there primarily at the time we were there because it was World Cup soccer. And, you know, my family loves soccer. And so, especially on a world stage. And France went on to win the World Cup this last year. And so it was very fun to be in Paris in a bar drinking champagne, because we don't drink beer. Champagne in a bar in France. It seems appropriate, doesn't it? And cheering with all the French for their team.
My husband and I I don't know, I think I was pregnant with Brady, who's now 12. So a while ago, we were in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico during World Cup soccer. And I think we were sort of unaware, you know, we knew it was going on, but we didn't quite figure and we went downtown to like do touristy stuff, and it just, everything shut down. Everybody, like everybody was somewhere watching the game, and then they wound up winning. They didn't win the World Cup, but they won the game that was happening that day. And craziness, like flags and like impromptu parades in the street. And I mean, it was a huge deal. So I can only imagine what it must have been like in France to be there as they win.
Exactly. So total fun. I mean, I love those kind of world stages where people come together of all different, you know, all different nations coming together to celebrate a sport. That, I think that's the best of the world coming together. And I love those as much as the politics behind all these big things in the FIFA organization
right.
Is a little less savory, but the event itself is so extraordinary, and people coming together just to celebrate sport and what we have in common. What do we actually have in common? How beautiful is that?
Well, that's why I feel like this is an interesting way. This may lead to a totally different conversation, but the way that my husband watches the Olympics compared to the way I watch the Olympics, and why they do broadcast the way they do broadcasts. Like, do I love me a good backstory, right? Like, I am all about the like features and the high, like learning what it took for this person to get here, to get to the world stage, and their story and all of that, so that when I watch this person perform, whether they do, you know, whether I'm sharing in their triumph or their agony, right? Like, I feel connected to that person. I feel like I'm sharing in that. And I think that's probably just part of who I am. And yet when my husband, he's like, enough with the fluff, just get to the stuff. You know?
Yes, my husband's fast forwarding. I'm like, wait, I wanted to know that. Yeah. What's going on? Well, you see, this is the same thing in World Cup, because what's different about it, though, is that all these players play on different teams.
Yeah.
And so when they come together and then they're playing against each other, the drama behind that is actually really fun and exciting.
I can see that. But that's the backstory, right?
Exactly.
So cool. Okay, Jean, I have a bunch of different questions to ask you, because I just sort of want to rapid fire. These are things, I've known you for a long time and we've never talked about these things. So I want to know. And some of them I asked you. So before I have guests come on, there's like a questionnaire of like, what do you think we should talk about? What are your pet peeves? Like, so some of those are those. And some of them are just, I just want to know. Like, I've never asked you this. So number one, do you watch TV?
I do not.
Oh, dang, I was going to ask you what your favorite show is.
I know. I honestly don't watch it. Every so often some show, you know, someone recommends something and I'll follow that show through. And a few years ago, my mother-in-law was really excited about Dancing with the Stars, and we were visiting with her. And so it became a thing actually we did with her, and although they live in Nova Scotia, on Monday nights we would all watch together. Aww. And so although, you know, I didn't necessarily care about the show or whatever, it was a fun family thing that we did together. And after last season, though, I'm done. I don't know if you watched that show, but
no.
If there was controversy, I know it was horrible. And so
I love it. I love how easily we can all get drawn in, right?
Oh, exactly. So I know I am not a TV watcher.
Well, that's okay. I am not a TV watcher either. I am a binge watcher. Like, I'm not just a scroll through whatever. Just before this call, I was like trying to squeeze in the last few minutes of an episode of a series of unfortunate events on Netflix, because that is how I roll. Like, when I am committed, good God, I am committed. In fact, I think I told you this. Gina and I are in a mastermind together, and there was a show that I just like found on Netflix and thought, oh, I'll just watch this. Like, it looks good. The guy from Gilmore Girls was in it, and I was like, sure, I'll watch that. It was called Supernatural. That's up my alley. I didn't realize when I started watching it, it looked like an old show. So I was like, cool, I'll watch this old show. I didn't realize that it had like 13 seasons or something.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was a commitment, Jean. It was a commitment. But that's how I do anything is how I do everything. And I was committed to that show. So.
Well, I did make my husband watch 6 seasons of Once Upon a Time.
Oh, I loved that one.
Yeah. He wasn't quite as committed, but he did watch it with me.
Oh, now that is a good man, because my husband rolled his eyes and was like, what the hell are you watching? I was super into that show. Okay, more rapid fire questions. Oh, this is not rapid fire, but there are 2 things I want to talk to you about. One, you've been talking about art and living on the artist edge, and I'm looking at the clock. And I know that you and I were talking the other day, and I was telling you that I have colors in my mind for days of the week. And I'm wondering, one of the things you wrote is that you love talking about the meanings of colors. So do you have colors for the days of your week? Or what do you have colors for that are like arbitrary?
That's really interesting, because I have never tied them to a very specific thing, because I'm so expressionistic. I will make the same thing a different color every day. And so that's why I have dogs that are orange and dogs that are green and dogs that are, it is whatever comes through that day. Exactly. So we could just ask today, so what color are you today? And we could hang out in that. So apparently I'm just every color today. So yes.
That is 1,000% you. I don't know if you know this about you. You probably do. But I feel like your base is black and white. Right? Like most things that how you show up, whatever, is black and white. So even as I'm looking at what you're wearing, your shirt is black and white, your hair is black and white, and then there is whatever splash of color you add to that is like, that's who you are today. It's almost like, I don't want to say coloring within the lines, right? But like, it's like you are a living coloring book in that way. Like there it is in black and white. And then what do you throw on there?
I might lean into that.
Yeah. Even like your glasses frame, like you show up with different kinds of glasses for different days. Like, yeah. So there you go. Cool. You're paint by numbers. I can color you whatever I want. Okay. So what about the meaning of colors? Because you said you like talking about that. So
yeah,
talk to me about it.
I really do like the meaning behind them, because, and of course it comes down to the meaning that you have for it, right? And it's saying, why are you wearing fuchsia today? Like, how does that make you feel? And where does that make you go? And what does it remind you of?
And, I had the conversation with myself, by the way, because if everyone hasn't noticed, I'm sunburned. And I was like, wearing this color is only going to accentuate the sunburn. And yet today was not a white t-shirt kind of day.
I totally get it.
It was a fuchsia day.
Exactly. And it's about how those colors actually vibrate at certain rates. And there's really interesting things about color composition then, which gets into this really weird technical place of art. And although I paint intuitively, I use color composition. And so I will often say, well, because a painting like this doesn't buzz. This is more of a field of color, because the colors are all analogous. But colors will buzz when you put them against their complementary color.
Okay,
and so you can
that to me.
Okay,
buzz,
so you
like in your head, or
no? So you can create energy. They actually have an energy, like they're fighting against each other.
Okay,
and so they create a burst of energy that actually comes out from the painting because they're next to each other, and it makes the painting come alive by having those next to each other. And so you can create energy inside of painting that people will feel when they hang it on their wall.
Holy
And
shit, Jean. Because I know the other kinds of paintings that you do, like the more it's interesting that you're sitting in front of this. I love it because right? The whole point of this is to talk to people about the stuff that they're not known for, right? And this painting behind you is different than any other painting I've ever seen you do. And now you're talking about like what I know Jean to be. And it makes so much sense. I've never seen a painting of yours that didn't come to life, that didn't
right.
buzz.
Right. Well, and what's interesting, of course, this is in my living room, and what kind of feeling do you want in a space like this? So I don't need to activate the energy in here. We're going to sit by the fire. We're going to sit down. We're going to have a relaxing time. We're going to have a conversation. You know, the redness of it is kind of an activating color just for all of us to converse together. And so that's causing a fire, but it's just a single fire. Whereas something, you know, what do you want to activate? So in like an office or something like that, you want something to happen. Don't put a bucolic painting of a pond in your office. That's not what you want to happen in the office. You want to activate the energy, open it up, make something happen. And when you have something that's already activating energy, like a painting or something that's making the energy go, it just makes your job easier.
I mean, it makes sense. I guess I've just never thought about it. Like, I just never thought about it. Okay, so the meaning of colors.
Yeah, and so some colors have some classic meanings behind them that, you know, they can be go-tos. It's kind of like directions or feng shui or those kind of things.
Yeah.
There are things that you say, these are the rules. Red is a hot color. It typically means fire in the belly, passion, you know, all those kind of things are the typical meanings. Yet every so often I find someone who doesn't have that meaning for red. And so it's really that idea of coming down to, well, the intuitive art, the whole thing of, you know, how can you make answers out of this, which is a whole nother thing, right? Is then picking a meaning for a color for you. So then you can make a drawing that will give you answers.
So good. Okay, a couple more questions for you. There's two things that are popping out when I look at my notes on what I want to talk to you about. So two things. I'm going to say them and you decide.
Okay.
The paleo diet, which I had no idea you were a paleo diet chick. And this one's not from your questionnaire. This is just something I know about you. Multi-level marketing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Cool.
We can talk about both. You just pick.
Okay. Well, I'm feeling inspired to talk about food. So
Are you getting hungry, Jean?
It must be lunchtime. You know, it's interesting because just as we do one thing, we do everything, right? Is to go to an edge and check it out and then report back. And I think I've always looked at food in a different kind of way. And instead of vilifying foods or things, you know, in the 80s, they vilified fat. Don't do fat. It's a horrible thing for you. And yet finally, you know, coming back to my own senses and saying, well, there's no food that's really evil, but there are some that are way better than others.
Yeah.
And my son actually had to go gluten-free when he was 15, which that's a hard enough thing anyway. And by the time he got to college, he figured he better learn how to cook because he wasn't going to be able to go anywhere. And eventually he started to research things. And so I didn't even start the research. He came to visit me after his second year of college for a couple weeks, and he cooked for me for 2 weeks. And he was at the time on the paleo diet. And I felt so good at the end of it. You know, I just felt good. And it's one of those diets that makes sense. Okay, we're going to eat vegetables and fruit and meat.
Yeah.
Add some nuts for fun. And oil is not an evil thing. It makes you feel full and happy. Then shortly after that, my husband decided to research diets, and he decided to go on the keto diet, which is all about fats and those kind of things. And so we ended up finding kind of a middle ground of foods that we like to cook together. And it became a family thing because we were all choosing what we wanted to eat. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing. Again, in that same way, is getting to a place where you look to the edge, right? Look to what is possible.
Yeah.
And then choose, not out of upset or frustration or past or body image or any of those things that you desire, but from what you desire, and then choose. And I'm just really excited about eating this way, just because I don't need to vilify sugar to know that it doesn't work well in my body.
Yes.
I don't need to vilify, processed foods or anything else. All I need to do is say, well, I feel great when I do this, so I'm just going to do more of that.
I am similar. I'm like paleo vegan in that meat and I don't really, we're not like simpatico. People always ask, are you a vegetarian? I'm like, no, I mean, I don't eat meat, but occasionally I do. Like it's kind of bizarre. And if ever I eat meat, it's always like ground beef or ground turkey. It's like the weirdest, like not actually even feeling like meat, but I digress. For me, maybe because I've just fallen into doing what feels good and listening to my body, and I tend to eat a shit ton of vegetables and some nuts, and like I don't eat very many grains. But anyways, all that to be said is I don't even notice that I feel good because I feel so good. What I notice is like if I have pizza or if I have sugar, because I mean, I love me some sugar. Like I really do. I could totally do without it. I don't like want it, but when I have it, I'm like, oh man, that was delicious. That was so good. I want me some more, right? Sugar is super addictive. So like the minute it touches my tongue, I'm addicted all over again. But I wake up the next morning and I look at my bloated face and I have a headache and I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I don't do that.
Okay, but you did mention pizza, and I have to bring this whole thing up on pizza because this is actually really funny. So, at the beginning of the year, how everyone, and we did talk about this in our mastermind because someone asked, what is your word of the year? Well, I really, I didn't want a word of the year. I've done it in the past, but I'm like, yeah, I'm just not doing a word of the year. I might do a word of the moment. And so the word of the moment I chose was pizza. And of course, why? The reason is because, pizza in that kind of diet typically is completely off. There's just nothing about it that can work.
Right.
Pizza is off the menu. And yet this year I found pizza I could have. And of course, anything that has kind of a round thing with stuff on the top, you can call it pizza. And so, I found at Whole Foods this Capello's pizza crust, which is grain-free. And then we put this yummy sausage on it, which, that's awesome. And then lots of vegetables and tomato sauce. And then here's the thing, see, because I don't eat dairy. My husband eats dairy. But if you put a little truffle oil on the top of it, oh my God, you don't miss cheese at all. It is totally okay. And so pizza's back on the menu. And what that means is I get to do whatever I want.
Which, how you do anything is how you do everything. This is one of the things I love most about Eugene is you do whatever you want. You really do. I love that about you. You will get yourself occasionally into the feeling of have to, the feeling we all get to in our business, but you almost always have you've always eventually had this delightful epiphany where you're like, oh yeah, I get to do what I want. I don't have to. And I love that about you. And I love because of course you give then everyone else permission to not have to.
Well, it is funny because this past week I was just like in this, just like, this is not working. I was in the systems thing, right? All the systems of my business. I hate the systems. I don't want to do systems. It's just not fun. I don't want to do those. And it's just so funny because I was just sitting and suffering about it, right? And then of course it just gets worse. That broke down and then this broke down. Well, that doesn't work either. And when I finally saw myself
Yes.
in all of that, like, oh yeah, no, I'm the fun and play person. I forgot for a minute.
Yes. Oh, you're going to make me yawn, Jean. And not because you're boring, but because that was like an energy shift for me. All right, last question, because then I got to go.
Cool.
Multi-level marketing. We have had several conversations about this. So just talk to me about your feelings on it.
Oh, I actually love multi-level marketing, which is so interesting. And I started multi-level marketing when I was 18 because I could see that I was a rebel enough that I needed to have something that was my own. And yet I didn't want to have to create all the systems and structure around it. And so I think it's so beautiful that it's all done.
So I need to know, when you were 18, what was the company?
Oh, so I was an Amway.
Of course
and
you were.
because that was the only one that there was, that was what there was. And so I didn't want to do soap or anything. So I actually sold the cosmetics and I did a color analysis class where of course I did, how do you do that and make it work for you? And so I taught community ed classes for color analysis. And then I would sell makeup. And so
love it.
It was pretty fun. But over the years, I've been with various companies, and I did creative memories, as my kids were growing up, and I had to photo document their whole life. And when they graduated, I had this anthology. Here's the anthology of your life. Boom.
Yes.
All these books. And that was fun. It was really fun and allowed me to have my own thing. And make money and do all those kind of things. And I love that it's light on its feet. When I was done with that, I could say, call my customers and say, I'm going to do something else now. And they're like, cool, what are you doing now? And so it's that whole idea about being fully you and then finding a system or structure that aligns with that, because it's already done. And so, I really do like the network marketing model. I'm not currently in one, which is kind of interesting. After all these years, it's the first time that I'm not doing any network marketing, but I really love the model because it makes it so accessible. And I love the team. I love that everyone grows together and really supports each other. There's just nothing like that. And you have to create that inside your other businesses. How do I create team?
Yeah, you do. That's how we met, right? I was desperate to create team, and there it is. All right, Jean, you've been lovely to talk to. I hope that everybody watching, so I did a little bit of market research, and I asked in these videos, like, do you want to know ahead of time, that Jean's the CEO of Apple? She's not. Or do you, and we're talking about, paleo pizza, or do you want to watch the video and then be curious at the end? And I've gotten mixed feedback, but more so about finding out at the end. So those of you watching this video, you can find out all about Jean and what she does in the description, in the comments somewhere around this video. But I just hope that I know everybody who's watching has fallen in love with you and really seen how you do everything. Right? Like, I love that. I don't know if you meant to do this, but the theme that has, this is my favorite thing about doing these, right? Is as people start talking about themselves, I'm like, of course. Oh my gosh, yes, I can see the thread, right? But the thread is so clearly that artist's edge. Like living on that artist's edge, which is daring and joyful and playful and curious. And, it's not reckless, it's adventurous. And then reporting back with wisdom. That's how I see you.
Wow. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on. This was tons of fun. I really liked the conversation.
Well, good. So is there any parting words, any last things that I need to know, our viewers need to know?
Oh, just, be you. Like, hang out in the colors that make you happy.
Of course you would say that. Hang out in the colors that make you happy, which is why I'm in fuchsia today. All right, Jean Berry, you are delightful. I love you so much. I hope that everybody watching is now in love with Jean too, that you are liking, commenting, sharing, learning, growing, investigating Jean, just that you got exactly what you needed today and that you can move forward in the colors that are you. And if you did get something, if you did have an aha, leave a comment and let us know. All right, Jean, thanks for playing today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll see you next time.